Let me show you how easy it is to make 3 gifts with EasyCarve, and the best part is you don't need any design skills at all. So over the weekend I had a little bit of fun making this plaster casting. Now the pattern was made out of a part that I created in EasyCarve. And I simply chose a background, a recessed dish shape or model, put it in the background and then cut it, and then I gave it a nice sort of sealant so that it was nice and sealed. And this is just a piece of MDF that I happened to find around the labs, and I was surprised how well it worked out. So I took that pattern and I created a silicone mold, and it worked out really, really well. Really quite happy with that. And then when I cast in the plaster, that's what I ended up with. Now I gave it a bit of a clear coat, but that inspired me to think about what I could do with this. Maybe as a gift I could give to a teacher, or I could have a class make up maybe 10 or 15 of them that they could actually hand paint and give to people. Kind of a little bit of an encouragement. And maybe it could even be a thumbs up. And we happen to have a thumbs up model that we can use. So let me show you how I made that pattern. Okay, so here I have EasyCarve ready to go. So I'm going to create a brand new project. And for this one, like I had said, we are going to choose a background. Now we have a growing collection of backgrounds right now. So I'm going to grab this simple background number 1 round. The nice thing about this round one is it's got a flat top on it. So I can actually cut a dish model into that and have a nice little sort of plaque. Now once that's loaded in, you're going to see in my 3D view, I've got the purple sort of square here that shows me the region that I can put a single model in. So let me add an element, and I'm going to choose to add a model. And let's search for thumb. And there I have the thumbs up model, which I think is going to be perfect for this job. And we're going to use the dish shape one. Now what's also really nice about this model, and not all of our models are this way, but this one is in a nice round dish, so it should fit perfectly in the center of that round shape. So let's import that in. So the next thing we're going to want to do is go on to our actual model size or our project size. In this case, the piece of MDF that I have is, like I said, is a cutoff that's been kicking around. We've used it for other things, but I just need to make a pattern from it. It's going to be 6 inches by 6 inches, and I think the thickness of it, now the thickness of the material I have is 0.71 of an inch thick. So I'm going to make this about 0.6 of an inch. So I'm going to use the majority of that for my pattern, and that should make it look pretty nice and really make that detail pop. So that looks pretty good, and I don't want to flip it or rotate it. I think it looks good just the way it is. So let's go on to our material. Now in this case, I'm going to be using MDF, and if I go to my drop down here for materials, you'll see I have hardwood, medium wood, and softwood. Well, I want to add in a new material, and I'm going to choose it from my list of materials here. So I'm going to look up MDF and choose that, and then we're going to add that material. And now I have it in my list of materials. And I can go back, and then we can choose that from my drop down. There we have it. Now let's type in the thickness of my material, 0.71. And we want to make sure that my model is placed right at the very top of my material, because I'd like to have that extra material at the back so that I can just sort of make it a little bit thicker. And if we look at that, that looks pretty good. There's a little bit of extra meat at the back there. That's perfect. So let's go now and look at our material setup that we're going to have on our machine. So for this one, I'm going to choose my XY datum or my XY start position to be in the bottom left-hand corner. It'll make it me a bit easier to put the model where I want it to be. I'm going to zero off the top of my material, and I'm not going to use an offset. And we can check to make sure everything is correct. Looking in our 3D view again, you'll see that the model is now beneath the surface of our material, so that looks great. The dish shape is again cut out of the top of that background. Everything looks perfect, so let's have a look at generating our tool paths. Now I only have one machine added right now, so it's my Avid Pro. If I wanted to add a new machine, I could choose that if I wanted to, but we're just going to move on to the next step because I'm going to be using that Avid. Now what I'm going to need to do is, during my cutout pass, I would like to leave tabs behind. So I'm going to screw my MDF down, and I like to have tabs to hold my pattern in place. So let's add some tabs, and we're going to add in 4 tabs, and these sizes look about right. 1/2 inch, 0.1 inch thick, that's great. And let's generate those tabs and just put them exactly where I would want them to be if I was going to hand place these. So we'll leave those right where they are, And let's save those tabs and let's add our first tool path. So we're going to start off with our roughing tool path. This is going to remove the majority of our material. Now, because I've added a brand new material, I don't have any tools associated to that material and associated to the Avid machine. So let's drop down our tool selection, and I'm going to edit this end mill that I happen to have in here. So I'm going to add some new feeds and speeds. It's for the Avid machine. That could be whatever machine you happen to have. It's going to be for the MDF, and I need to now go ahead and check to make sure that these cutting parameters are safe and appropriate for my machine. So with mine, I can actually ramp up the spindle speed a little bit. I can visualize millimeters per second better than I can inches per second. So let's make this 35. And our plunge rate, we can make that 12. And we'll add that entry in. Now I can go back again, and you'll see that now that tool is there for me to use. And I can calculate my tool path. Now I've chosen a raster angle of 0, so it's just going to go back and forth. If you feel it's more appropriate to use an angle, then you can go ahead and add that in. What we're going to want to do is check to make sure this is what we expect to see on our CNC machine, and it is exactly that. I'm very happy with that. So let's move on to the next tool path, and we're going to add in a finishing tool path. In this case, again, I don't have any tools associated with the new MDF material that I have. So we're going to drop this down. I'm going to add in a brand new tool. Now, I want to make sure that I get the best detail I can. When it comes to making a pattern to create a mold from, the more detail you have, the smoother the finish, the better your castings are going to be, because your mold is going to take on all of those little inconsistencies. So you want to make sure that you're either happy with that. Maybe the material you're going to cast, it doesn't matter. But in my case, I want to have a decent finish because I'm going to be using plaster or plaster of Paris for that. So in that case, I'm going to use a tapered bullnose. The diameter of that is going to be, it's a 1/16 inch bullnose end mill. So I'm going to put in a 0.0625. My angle for that, now I got that off of the manufacturer of the bit. It's 5.4 degrees. And the tip radius is going to be 1/32. So that's going to be 0.031 of an inch. I can add in some extra information if I'd like to, but I'm just going to go ahead and just add that tool. I need to add in some feeds and speeds for that tool. Now, one of the great things about a tapered bullnose is that it's quite a robust tool because of the way the geometry is shaped. So I can actually run a little bit harder than I could with a straight walled 1/16 inch end mill or bullnose end mill. So I can kind of ramp that up to be, let's say 55 millimeters per second with our particular machine. Again, you want to choose feeds and speeds that are safe and appropriate for yours. And we'll make this 18, and we can add that entry in. Let's go back. Okay, that's perfect. We can calculate that. And in this case, again, it's really important that I'm happy with the preview of the tool path to make sure that it looks as good as it can. And I'm really happy with that. There's a little bit of cusping or tool marks in there, but I can sand those out. And because of the material I'm going to be using, the plaster, I don't think it's going to matter too much, even if I left them just as they are. So let's go again now and add our last tool path in, which is going to be our cutout tool path. We're going to use our end mill that we had originally. We don't need to worry about any final pass height. We're going to use a cut direction of climb, and we can just calculate that. And now what I'm looking for in this particular tool path is to make sure that my tabs are there, and they are, and they look great. And I'm really happy with that. So the next thing I want to do now is move on to my tool paths list. I have all the tool paths I need. Now, like with EasyCarve, and I've mentioned this in other videos, is that you don't need to always use all of those tool paths. You can choose the ones that you need for your job. But we have all that we need, so let's go ahead and export those out. I need to choose the proper post processor for my machine. And one of the nice things about this step is that I can look at the summary at the top. And if anything here isn't quite right, I can go back and correct it and then recalculate my tool paths if I need to. But everything is set up properly, and it's a great little reminder of how I need to set up my job on my machine. That's a perfect post processor, that would be great. And I can export those out. Now, once those are all exported out, in my case, I'm going to save them off to a USB drive and bring them over to our machine. So let's go ahead and gather up my MDF and let's go cut that pattern. Okay, so I've got those tabs all sanded off. Now, the real trick to making a good mold is having a really good pattern. So what I want to do is I'm going to spend a little bit of time and sand down as many of those milling lines as I can to make it as smooth as I can. And then I'm going to take some sand and sealer. I'm going to put a coat of that on there, let it dry, and probably put a second one on as well. That way I'm sure that it's going to be nice and sealed for the mold making. And that should be really good. So let me get to that, and then we'll catch up after I got that all finished up. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry, but while I'm letting that dry, I'm gonna go back over to EasyCarve and create our next gift. Okay, so I have this box that I happened to find on Amazon. It's a nice little pencil box. It's got a little magnetic top on it, but I made a bit of an error when I ordered it. I wanted to actually cut a nice EasyCarve project in the top of it, but the material's a bit thin on the top, and that would make it a little bit difficult. So what I think I'm going to do is use this piece of hardwood that I found and cut an applique that I can then glue on the top. And what's nice about this, I think this gift would be great for a student, maybe somebody who's going off to university, could be for a teacher, maybe who somebody really likes to draw or to write. I think it would be a great little gift. So let's go ahead and put that aside for a minute, and let's find a model that would work for the top of this. So let's create a brand new project. And in this case, I'm not going to use a background. Unlike the last job, we're actually just going to choose a single model on its own. And let's type in flourish. And we are going to, I happen to know which one I'd like to use. So I'm going to use this one right here, which is Flourish 88D. I've seen this before and I think it looks really nice. Now again, if the material that I had was thicker on the top, I could have cut right into it, this nice oval shape, but it's not thick enough. So we're just going to cut it on its own and we'll create a new project with that. Now that's exactly what I want. I think that's going to look really nice, sort of orientated this way on the top of the box. Yeah, it looks really good. So let's go on to our next step, which is size and position. So with this one, we're going to need to be sure that we make a nice accurate measurement of the top of our box, or the space that we have to use to add an applique to it, and make sure that our model isn't any bigger than that. And what's nice about EasyCarve is we take the size of your model as what it's going to cut. So in this particular case, we have on the top of this about 7 inches, and that's going to be the width. Now you'll see what happens when I went and changed that to be 7 inches. It made it 7 inches wide. So that's kind of the wrong orientation. So let's turn that over like that. And now we've rotated that around. And now if I change the width of it to be 7, the height of it will be around 1.75. Let's make that an even 1.75 just to make life easy for me. That's great. So I can sort of measure and make sure it's centered on the top of my box nicely. And the thickness of this, we can zoom in a little bit and we can take a look at that. Now, obviously my material is not set up quite right for the thickness of that. So let's go one step further and then we're going to come back to this. So we're going to type in our thickness of our material, which in my case is 0.4 of an inch. And now you'll see that my model will get updated. And I would like to go back to my model again. So I'm going to jump back and forth just a little bit and just check the height of my model, or the thickness of my model. And I would like it to be probably about 1/4 inch thick. That would make it quite proud off the top of the box, still fit inside my material. But I'm going to have quite a bit of backing. So when I jump back to my material again, I can put this towards the back of my material, and that way it'll thin out. Now, that's nice. And if I was sure that my material would hold up, then I could cut it like that. But it does get quite thin in here. So let's add 0.1 to the back. And that'll make it a little bit thicker. I don't think it's too thick. And it shouldn't break when I'm trying to get it out of the material. So everything is pretty much set up right. Now, the next thing I want to think about is the material that I've chosen. Now, I'm going to drop this down, and this is a hardwood that I've got, or at least I believe it is. So we're going to change our material. That way, when I have the option to choose my tools, it'll be the right material, the right feeds and speeds for that material. So let's go next to our material setup on our machine. We're going to do the bottom left-hand corner. We're going to zero off the top of our material. No offset. That's going to look pretty good. and you'll see this drop down a little bit from the top. So that's really nice. And let's generate our tool paths. It is the Avid that we're going to be using to cut this one on, so that's perfectly fine. Let's go on to creating our tool paths. Now, like before, we are going to need to add in some tabs, because if not, we either need to use double-sided tape to hold this in place, which is fine. But I would like to use tabs. So let's add in our tabs. And these are 1/2 inch tabs. Let's make these a bit smaller, because this is a little bit of a smaller piece. So 1/4 inch tabs, 0.05 of an inch thick. And let's make 6 tabs, an even number, and let's generate those. And we'll see where the software feels they should be. Now you'll see that we do our best to try and get them where they should be, but they're not quite exactly right. So we can click on these and we can delete out the ones that aren't in the right place, and we can replace them with new ones. That looks great. We'll save that off. And now we'll add our tool paths. In this case, we're gonna do a roughing and a finishing and a cutout path. So let's start off with our roughing. We're going to use that 1/4 inch end mill that we used before. It looks great, but in this case, it's going to be the feeds and speeds for the hardwood that we have. So let's calculate that. Yeah, it looks pretty decent. So let's go on to our next tool path. Let's add in one, our finishing tool path. We're going to use that tapered ball nose that we added in before, but now it's not set up for this material. So let's just go ahead and edit that. We're going to add some feeds and speeds for the Avid machine in hardwood. We're just going to make sure these are safe and appropriate for the machine. Millimeters per second. Let's make that 35. I'll make this 12. And we will add that entry in. We can go backwards now. Okay, we're happy with that. So let's turn that off. And let's just go ahead and calculate that. That looks really good. I'm happy with the amount of detail I'm going to get there. That looks perfect. Now for the last thing, we're going to create our cutout tool path. Now I want to make sure that I can get into a lot of these little areas here that I couldn't get with a 1/4 inch end mill. So let's just add our tool path in, a cutout tool path. We're going to add a brand new tool. In this case, we're going to make it an end mill, but it's going to be a 1/8 inch end mill. So 1, 2, 5. That looks great. We'll add that tool. We're going to need to add some feeds and speeds. Again, it's for the Avid in hardwood. We can make this 18. We'll make this millimeters per second. Let's go 35. That's perfect. We'll add that entry. We can go back now, choose that tool out of our tool list, and we can calculate that. And hopefully we'll get into some of these little spots that would be really hard for the end mill to get into. And there are our tabs. That looks really nice. Anything else I can kind of clean up in the end. Let's go to our next tool path, which is going to be, I guess we got them all right now. So that's great. All done. Just make sure we got all that we need. Let's export those tool paths. Again, sort of review what we've done, and that all looks great. And we can just export those out. Once those are saved off, then we can go ahead and affix this to our CNC machine and get it cutting. Okay, that turned out quite nice. So I'm going to put that aside for now, and tomorrow I'll cut that out and sand it all down. So now on to making a mold for our pattern that we made. So we put a couple coats of clear coat on there, sanded it back a little bit. That looks really good. So to do this, what we're going to do is I've got some foam core, cut off some strips. So we're going to build some walls around this pattern, and then we're going to use a hot glue gun to seal it all up. And then we're going to mix up our silicone to make our mold with, and then we're going to pour it in. We're also going to use this rice. It's one of those little tricks of the trade that I found out online, is we can use this rice to figure out what the volume is of silicone we need to make a decent mold. So once we have that, then we can use that amount to measure out the proper amounts of silicone, mix that all up, pour it in, let it set for 24 hours, and hopefully we'll be able to break it out and we'll be able to start casting some plaster into it. Let's get into it. That's that. We mixed up 3 batches of it to fill it in nicely, I think. It hasn't leaked yet, so that's a good sign. So we're gonna leave this overnight to cure. We can demold it in the morning and see how it looks. Hopefully everything will be just work perfectly fine. And then also tomorrow we can get on to our third gift, which I'm pretty excited about. Day 2, the mold needs to cure for about 24 hours. So we're gonna let that set up for a little bit longer before we demold it. Now yesterday, if you remember, we went ahead and cut the applique for the top of the pencil box. Today we're gonna need to cut that out of the wood, do a little bit of finishing, and then put it on the top of our pen box. We'll do that a bit later. Now for our next gift, I thought we might use a cutoff that we had sitting around from another project that we cut quite a while ago. And this looks like the perfect sort of plaque shape. And we have a bottle opener kicking around. So I thought that maybe we could affix the bottle opener to the bottom of this and then cut a nice sort of dish-shaped model in the top. Now before we get into EasyCarve, the best sort of workflow for this is to lay this down on my counter and line everything up and then measure the area that I would like to size up my model to fit. And once I have that, then we can jump right into EasyCarve, pick our model, size it up, and get it cutting on the CNC. Okay, so let's start off with a new project. And this is just going to be a single model because we don't need a background for this. And I think what I'd like to do is use a model of some hops. And I particularly like this hops and barley model. So let's choose that one. And I'm going to choose the dish shape. Now what's nice about this is it's a nice circle, so I should be able to place it pretty much in the center of the area that I have in that dish shape, so it'll be below the surface of my material. So let's grab that one and then create my project. Okay, and there we have it. That looks really good. Let's move on to our next step, which is going to be the size and the position. So when I measured up my board, I've got around 5 inches square to place this. So if we make this more like 4.75, just to be safe, and the thickness of my material when I measured it was around 0.71 of an inch. So if we go down maybe 0.3 of an inch, I think that will probably be deep enough. And then I can take a look at the model just to be sure that nothing is exaggerated too much. There aren't any real thin areas. And I think that should do the trick. So let's move on to our next step, which is actually setting up our material. So I'm going to choose softwood from my list because that's what this is. It's a piece of pine. My material thickness is going to be 0.71. I'm going to push my model all the way up to the top of my material, which is perfect. And then we can move on to the next step. I'm going to be setting my XY datum in the center of where I want this to be cut. So what I'm going to need to do before I bring my material over to the CNC machine is actually mark the center of that 4.75 inch circle that I'm gonna, or area that I want, so that I can be sure that I get it centered where I'd like it to be. And that might take a little bit of eyeballing because I want to kind of fit on the bottle opener as well. So I kind of need to figure out where that's going to be, but I can do that in a minute. I'm going to be zeroing off my material surface, and we're not going to use any offsets. So let's go ahead and have a look at generating our tool paths. I'm just going to use the machine that we've been using and create some tool paths. 0 tabs, because I'm not going to cut this thing out. I don't need to worry about tabs. But in saying that, it's important to remember too that I'm going to need to fixture this down somehow to my machine so I'm not putting any holes in it. It'd be nice if I already knew how I was going to affix this to the wall, because maybe I could have some holes already drilled into it that I could use to hold it down with. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a double-sided tape, and that should be perfectly fine, I think, for this particular job. So we'll use that instead of any kind of other fixturing. So no tabs. And then we're going to add in a roughing tool path. We're just going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, which is pretty standard. Everything here looks fine, and we'll just go ahead and calculate that. And that's what I expect to see, which is it's a pretty rough looking thing, but that's all right. Let's go to our next tool path, and we're going to add in a finishing tool path. Now I'm going to use that tapered ball nose that we had before, but it's not set up for softwood, excuse me. So let's go and edit that. And we're just going to take a look and make sure that we add some feeds and speeds for softwood. So you can see there's the CNC machine that I've chosen, which is the Avid. I'm going to choose my material, which is softwood. And I can take a look at these cutting parameters here to make sure that they're correct. The only thing I do want to change is the spindle speed. I'm going to change my units to be millimeters per second. We're going to make this like 50 and make this 12. And that should be pretty good. If those are wrong, then what I can do is, because I'm using my controller software, I have the ability to speed up or slow down my toolpath. Then at the actual machine level, I can mess around with that a little bit if I want to. But that should be a good starting point. So let's add that entry. Let's go back to our toolpath. There we go, that looks right. We are going to go ahead and just choose that out of the list to make sure it's right. Yep, there we go. Let's calculate that. That'll take a second to calculate. Now, as I've said this before with EasyCarve, if what you see on screen is not what you want to have happen on your CNC machine, then you should go ahead and relook at your tooling. But I'm really happy with that. Any sort of problems with it, I'm going to overlook because I'm using this pine and it's not going to be able to retain a whole lot of detail. So I'm pretty happy with the way that's going to look. I'm really actually quite happy with that. So let's go to our toolpath list again, and that's it now. I'm just going to use a roughing toolpath and a finishing toolpath. So we can export those toolpaths now, and we'll save those out on our PC. Now, like I said before, I'm going to need to go ahead and figure out where the center of this is going to be cut. So I've got my measuring tape, I've got my pencil, and I got everything to go. So let's go ahead and measure that up. Okay, let's go ahead now and put this over here aside while it dries. Now while it dries, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up the plaster to put into our mold, and I will pour that. And that's going to take about 20 minutes to cure. But while that's doing its business, I'm going to come back over here and we are going to take off the tape and put a nice finish on our pencil box. And then if we're really lucky, our bottle opener should be dry and I can screw on the actual bottle opener and that will be finished. And once that's all done and that 20 minutes has passed, then we can pop out our casting and hopefully everything will look okay. Really like the way that turned out. It was a lot of fun for my first casting experiment. So I think our job here, 3 gifts, 0 design skills, it worked out perfect. We've got a background with a recessed model cut into it to create these nice plaster castings. We've got a pencil box, a thing I bought off Amazon. It didn't quite serve the purpose, so I used EasyCarve to create the applique for the top of the box. Worked out really nice. And then this piece of wood here for the bottle opener literally was a cutoff that we had from another project. A little bit of a layout going on here, but once I cut in that recessed hops on the top of it, it worked out perfect, adding the bottle opener to the bottom. It's a great gift for anybody who likes to have their beverages. It's great, yeah. So I hope you like that, and I hope that you go out there and you experiment. This is a small selection of what you can do with EasyCarve. Of course, you've got thousands of models to choose from if you're a subscriber to EasyCarve. If you haven't tried EasyCarve, go over to easycarve.com and sign up for our free trial experience, and you can see just how easy it is. If you have any questions, please leave some comments below. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And yeah, have lots of fun, and I hope that your CNC journey is really extra special and lots of fun. Thanks again.